So anyway, I'm just kind of paraphrasing the intro to him. Dr. Macaulay earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Stanford. He's a native of San Diego, and he played college football and was accepted by a number of medical schools. He selected the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, but kind of deferred his enrollment while he pursued a career in the NFL. He was drafted on the 11th round of the 1982 NFL draft by the Green Bay Packers. He played 1 year professional football for the San Francisco 49ers during the 1984 season. He won a Super Bowl title and his ring with the team. Then following a 3-year stint with Microsoft, he went back to SC San Diego. Anyway, Dr. Macaulay, John, I'm really happy to have you here today, and you're the guy.
Yeah, don't trip on it. There we go. Thanks, George. Great. Okay. You guys will have to bear with me here. I'm a little bit out of practice on this stuff. What George won't tell you and Bill won't tell you is that they caught me completely by surprise at the wine club event. You know, I thought I was there to eat dinner and, you know, meet some new folks, but I didn't know I was going to be put on the spot and get up in front of everybody, you know, especially at a group. Can you guys hear me now? Is that better? Like that? Okay, better. I'll try to keep it closer then. But remind me, because I'll forget. But anyhow, you know, I think this group is great, and this is certainly something I would consider doing. Although I subscribe to the theory, I think Groucho Marx gets credit for it. I would never belong to a club that would have me as a member. And that was kind of my, you know, that was kind of my lead-in too, because I, you know, back to. Can we start that? You get to start it, right? Up here? Or do I do that? Am I controlling it? I'm controlling it. That's dangerous. Oh, I got to press the button. There we go. There we go. I like that. Yeah, naming lights. Well, yes, I know. That's kind of scary, right? My ego will run with that all the time. So I wanted to just kick off this because, you know, Bill, my father-in-law, has, you know, I talk about people who have influenced me in my life, and I've been very, very fortunate to have the kind of folks in my life, in my family, and those that influenced me and led me on a path of success. And it's, you know, well, again, one of those quotes, those famous quotes, I think Lefty Gomez said this as the pitcher for the Yankees in the 30s. I'd rather be lucky than good. Well, that kind of marks my life. I've been lucky, much more lucky than good. There we go. So I put together a quickie little agenda here, and the introduction has almost been done, and I'm already starting into the milestones. We'll talk about a little bit about my academics and my athletics, and then some personal and professional life milestones, and then we'll wrap up. And if any of that stimulates any Q&A from you, I'll give you a little bit of time to shoot some questions at me, okay? No. What?
I can need some help.
Which I'm pressing the arrow key to the right.
Not doing it. Okay, let's go manual.
Okay, we'll go manual. Thanks, Neil. Kind of locked up on us there. There you go. All right, there we go. So the first person I want to bring up as a key person in my life was a kind of a famous general that you guys might know of. He was my great uncle, Matt Ridgeway. Matt Ridgeway took over from MacArthur in the Korean War. And Uncle Matt was really instrumental and influenced my life a lot. One of his key, I don't know if you can see it in this picture, this is a picture of him on the deck of the Bon Richard in 1951. You can see too well, but one of his signature branding marks was he wore a fragmentation grenade, a pineapple on his lapel everywhere he went when he was suited up. So that's why those Navy guys are kind of stiff. Because he's got a live grenade on his lapel. So you think it'll go to the next one, Neil? No, it won't go to the next one. Okay, so I'm gonna be. Okay, so Uncle Matt had a couple of, he was pretty famous. His face graced cover of Time, Life, Newsweek. He had a couple of, I was very fortunate. This is one of those, very fortunate to have him in my life as a youngster. And one of the things he instilled in me early on was real simple. He said, first you learn, then you earn, and then you return. Meaning that, you're going to go to school and learn, and you're going to go out, whatever you do, have a career, and you're going to, earn your way, pay your whatever. But you're also going to give back what's been so freely given to you, and that's where you return. So let's go to the next one. There's another picture, I think I've got it here, of Uncle Matt. I like this one a lot. He gave me a hat like this when I was young, and unfortunately it got lost in the scheme of things, but it was my cherished hat for a long time. Let's go next. These are a couple of his milestones. The one I think that's key here, and I, is that, we all know the Vietnam conflict, the Vietnam War was a real issue in our country's history. He actually gets credited with persuading, this is the final bullet down here, he persuaded President Eisenhower to delay, to not get involved in the Indochina War. So it delayed our involvement for over a decade, when then President Kennedy elected to get involved. And I feel very fortunate not to have been personally involved in that, but that was obviously something that was a real problem for our country. And anyhow, so next. These are a couple of his quotes. This augments what he said to me. First you learn, then you earn, then you return. Let's go next. I've given this over to Neil, and he can, and the next person I want to talk about now is my coach at Stanford. So Bill Walsh is the next key person, key influencer in my life. He recruited me out of high school in San Diego, personally did. He was then the offensive coordinator of the San Diego Chargers, right. And he was leaving in 1977, the year I was graduating. He was leaving to take over the head coaching position at Stanford, and he was recruiting me out of my high school, little Bonita Vista High School in San Diego.
Excuse me, one question. What position did you play?
In high school, I was a linebacker and tight end.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, it was good, yes. Anyhow, Bill, there was something special about him. You could just tell right from the start. And what was important to note is at that point in time, I was seeking entry to West Point, as well as the Naval Academy. Obviously my great uncle Matt wanted me to go to West Point, and my grandfather was a retired rear admiral. Was also he was urging me to go to the Naval Academy. Well, that was causing quite a stir between the family members, right? Uncle Matt wanted me to go to West Point, and Grandpa Art wanted me to go to the boat school. And excuse me, it was great because I never forget Uncle Matt, you see, he referred to the Annapolis, he called it as the VOTEC on the Severn. So, very derogatorily, I might add. So luckily, I got recruited by Bill Walsh to attend Stanford, and that was a little more my thing because I wanted to be a physician, and it was not a clear-cut path towards becoming a physician if you went to one of the military service academies. You know, going to Naval Academy, I wanted to be an engineer.
Stupid thing, sorry.
No problem.
I forgot to turn the darn thing off.
It keeps me awake. And by the way, anyone, you know, you might need to get up for coffee because I'm a great cure for insomnia. So feel free to go fill your coffee mug up during this. All right, so next.
Next slide.
So I have, I've included here, this is a picture from Bill's funeral service that I attended and actually sat next to John Madden of all people at the funeral service at Memorial Church at Stanford University. It was like a who's who in that private funeral service in the audience. But anyhow, Bill was stricken with this. He was 75 at the time that he passed away, but he had leukemia, and I was on his care team. And one of the things I'd never, you know, was always bugging me because he recruited me out of high school for Stanford, and then once I was drafted in the NFL by Green Bay, he traded for me because he had an injury. You know, the starting center at that time, Fred Pullen, went down with an injury, and so he traded for me when I was on Green Bay, and I came to San Francisco and thought I'd died and gone to heaven too. And you know, I never knew what he saw that was special in me because I knew there were thousands of guys more talented than me. Again, lucky rather than good or talented. But he said to me, you know, he said, John, the reason I selected and advocated for you is because a coach has 11 guys on the field at any one time. And, you know, they're young boys and you know, they're not always going to follow directions because what I absolutely admired in you and cherished and needed was I could tell you what to do. I could tell you to go blow that guy up, and I knew that was going to happen, or you were going to die trying, because you were like unleashing a Tomahawk cruise missile. I knew it was going to happen. There was going to be a big explosion. Hopefully, it'll be the other team's guy, but you know, it kept our guys on our toes. Anyhow, so next. This is also in his funeral service program, and I've left this with Neil as well. So there's a copy of this, electronic copy on his laptop. But this was a article that ran in the Los Angeles Times 3 days before we won Super Bowl 19 against the Miami Dolphins. And it talked about how different Bill Walsh is as a coach. You know, he wasn't the proverbial football coach with a crew cut and, just basically running his guys, running sprints and everything else. And he was quite a, obviously very successful coach, but he was something special to the players. He fostered that environment. One of the things that I want to do now is talk about, and if you can click to the next one. I brought a couple copies of Bill's book, left them on the back table, and there are a couple around here too. It's a great, great book. I think that, anyone who wants one, grab it. They're also available on Amazon, but I've brought some copies here. So feel free to grab one. So the score takes care of itself.
He's also smart. That's the thing about it. He's such a bright coach.
He was very bright. Yeah, he was great. I mean, we had him at Stanford, and he was always humorous too. I always thought that Bill could have taken over. He kind of looked like Johnny Carson, right? He had that dry sense of humor. Yeah. He had that very dry sense of humor too. He used to do things that were just amazing to me. We had a saying because he would come in and tell us, we called it lecture A. And he's, whenever he didn't want a player to do something, which there was quite a long list of things he didn't want us to do, he would say, we don't need it, we don't want it, and we just can't have it. Whether it was going to be staying out after curfew or whatever it was.
Remember, he got his start at San Jose State.
That's right. You're absolutely right. That's where he played too. He was a wide receiver.
And he also did boxing. Boxing was.
He did boxing as well.
Boxing was his
You're absolutely right.
only thing I liked the most,
So-
considering that's not that kind of individual.
Absolutely. But bottom line, summing it up, I'm kind of the sum total of the people that have been key influencers in my life. My Uncle Matt, Bill Walsh, and others. And some of you know who you are today that, have influenced me and kept me on the right track. Because I don't always keep the right track in mind, let me tell you. One of the things that, it's funny because I have done the speaker circuit before. I worked in Tony Robbins' organization. And the first time I got a chance to speak was kind of it was a very challenging time, right? Because I was going to be speaking to Hewlett Packard executives, their upper management executives down in Palo Alto. And I didn't realize at the time that I was actually going to be standing in for someone else. And at that time, I finally got who am I replacing? And it was Reggie Jackson. Okay. And I said, well, do these folks know that Reggie's not going to be speaking? No. So I said, what the heck am I going to say? Because all these folks, they even brought, some had brought Reggie bars, the candy bar, and they were, Reggie, pictures of Reggie going to sign. I don't look anything like Reggie Jackson, believe me, right? So I'm thinking to myself, I'm praying to myself, what am I going to say? These people are going to, I said, one thing I've learned is if you have bad news, you get it out there as dispassionately as possible. So I took the podium and I said, excuse me, folks, Reggie is not going to be here. And after the audible groan left the audience, I said, but the organizers of this event, when they found out that Reggie wasn't available, they got together and they decided that they would get the best speaker possible. And when that person wasn't available, they reconvened. They decided that they would get the best looking speaker possible. And folks, I just didn't have the heart to turn them down twice. So that swept over me. That was a real lucky moment. And I've had lots of lucky moments, and a lot of them, like I said, you would probably not have picked me out of the audience to be, I'm not as famous as a Joe Montana or a Dwight Clark, although I played with them and won with them. But the guys that are, football players are a special kind of folk, right? We're really good at colliding with other men, right? Surviving collisions and not a whole lot else. I have to tell you, we're not the smartest folks, smartest tools in the shed. I have a couple of stories that I've told. Some of you have heard some of these stories in the past, and they're pretty good. So, and they come from me just listening and experiencing life with these other ball players. When I was on Green Bay, we had a defensive end named Ezra Johnson, and he was not real bright, but he could rush the passer. And I'll tell you what, you don't have to be bright in the NFL, but if you can rush the passer, you got a job in the NFL. So we were in a game and losing badly, and we're in Lambeau Field. And if you've ever seen Lambeau Field, has anyone ever been to a game at Lambeau Field? So you know that the stands, the spectators are very close to the field. In fact, you can reach up and basically touch the spectators if you're close, very close. Bottom line was Ezra got hungry. It was about the third quarter of the game, and flag down a hot dog vendor. And he's eating a hot dog during the game that we're losing by about 30 points. And the defensive line coach, Fred Von Oppen, was none too happy when he saw Ezra eating a hot dog. So there was a big problem with that. That was a huge problem. Bart Starr had to basically, negotiate a peace there right on the sidelines. And the next day in the paper, at the Green Bay Press Gazette, I was looking for this. They put a cartoon in the paper where it had Ezra going out for a pass, but it was a hot dog. It was great. That was his most famous moment in the NFL.
Did they actually cut it?
No, actually, he stuck around the NFL for like a long time,
Wow.
much longer than me. Tell you what.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, what probably hastened my exit from Green Bay faster than anything, we didn't win a whole lot of games there in Green Bay. We lost a game against the Jets, 30-0 in Shea Stadium. That's where the Jets played their home games at the time in New York, and it was crazy. That was when the Jets had the New York sack exchange at that time, and these guys were sacking us, and they sacked us, I think, 12 or 13 times during the game. And they were a four-man front, right? So the center, my position, is uncovered. I'm just supposed to help out, but I don't have any specific responsibility as long as the middle linebacker doesn't blitz. And they didn't need to blitz their linebacker because their four guys were giving us enough of a problem. Well, we come Monday after the game, Ernie McMillan, who was our offensive line coach, was just mean. He was a mean guy. He played next to Conrad Dobler on the St. Louis Cardinals. Conrad was pretty mean himself, probably the meanest guy in the NFL. But Ernie was really mean and hadn't got any nicer as a coach. When he came, he was giving everyone a bad time about all the sacks that he was having to explain to the head coach about. And when he came to me, I said, but coach, because I'm uncovered and I'm just helping out. I didn't have any direct responsibility. So none of those four guys that, each of them had like 4 sacks each against us. I said, but coach, I got my guy. And then, he took one of those folding metal chairs and threw it against the wall, like sailed against the wall and crashed into the wall right above my head. He didn't like that answer. So anyhow,
That's funny.
how am I doing time-wise? Am I good? Good, okay. So I got a couple more stories here, because these are now when I went to the 49ers. I had the opportunity to play on the offensive line with Bubba Paris.
Oh, yeah.
Bubba was, besides having a perennial weight problem, and it was, what you have to understand too is Bill Walsh and all of his infinite wisdom, he had a pet peeve, and that was he did not like players being out of shape, overweight or otherwise. Every guy on the team had an assigned ideal weight. And if you weren't at that weight, you would be fined $25 per pound per day that you weren't at that ideal weight. So it could be pretty costly. Anyhow, Bubba, I think his ideal weight was 295 pounds, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he was just a big human being, I don't think he'd been 295. I don't think he'd seen that since maybe 8th or 9th grade. So Bubba, he was getting fined, and I think he was weighing in at like 313 or something like that. But it was pretty, it was just sort of an ongoing thing. And then, actually in 1984, at the end of the season, we made a trade for a couple of San Diego Chargers, one of whom was Louis Kelcher, who was a documented 340 pounds, much bigger than Bubba. But And Louis got on the scale, the same scale that Bubba was weighing in on all the time. It was one of those big truck scales, right? With the sweeping hand that goes like this. And so he gets on the scale and after everyone else's weight, and the scale goes bing and stops at 313. You know, it wasn't like a scale when it reaches equilibrium, it starts to slow down, you know, the little planer. It just stopped, bing. And our offensive line coach, Bob McKittrick,
Oh, yeah. Good
who was
job.
doing the weighing, that was his job, with his clipboard out there. He looks at that and he knew that Louis weighed 340 at least. And he's looking, he's tapping on them, you know, he's tapping on the dial. What's going on with this? He's looking at this scale. What wound up happening, Bubba had a lot of skills. One of his skills was he had spot welded some dimes together, slid them under the, you know, the floating pad where you jump on. It was, and I've never seen, I now, you know, when the term spitting mad, McKittrick was spitting mad at Bubba. You know, you're fat, you're sloppy, you know, just, you know, McKittrick was an ex-Marine drill sergeant, so he could deliver that message like no one else.
But Bubba's a great player, though.
Bubba was a great player. He had a lot of talent, but he had a problem with eating. And the team tried to take it to the next level of control, right? Not just weighing him and finding him, but actually in training camp, where you're kind of hostage for 6 weeks of double days, they wouldn't let him eat anything except cottage cheese and peaches, okay? Cottage cheese and peaches. And that seems like that might work, right? But first of all, it created a lot of problem in our little small meeting rooms because the cottage cheese and peaches did not mix well with Bubba's constitution. So there was a lot of flatulence going on. Man, it was brutal. It was brutal. So Bubba, and then, you know, on Saturdays, when it wasn't before preseason, we would have a scrimmage, and we were having our training camps at this time up in Sierra College up in Rockland. So I would ask guys to catch a ride back to the Bay Area, right, where I live. Well, I asked Bubba if he could get a ride with him, you know, and this is during that time when he's on this strict diet, right? Well, we get about 15 minutes away from Rockland, Sierra College, and he stops at a Popeye chicken drive-through and starts ordering, right? I want a family size this, you know, I want extra hush puppies, this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, man, he's very thoughtful, you know, he's ordering for both of us. Then he turns to me, he goes, hey, you want anything? So when this order came, I think I absorbed more calories just looking at this than any meal I ever had before this. But that was Bubba. That was Bubba, I swear. Anyhow, we had other characters too besides Bubba, which were a lot of fun. One of whom, you remember Russ Francis, our tight end? Russ was what we call a player, okay? And we had curfew, and Walsh was really smart the way he managed the curfew. He said, you know, most guys, we're gonna have you we'd like to have you come in at 11, but we're gonna just set curfew at 11:15, so no one's rushing in, you know, there isn't any big clamoring to get in the door. But Russ, about 11:20, you could hear his motorcycle, his Harley, fire up. He was leaving at about the time that curfew was basically over. So that was Russ. It was, and it wasn't subtle at all. If you've ever heard a Harley Davidson fire up, think of it in the, you know, the halls of a junior college like we were in a dorm. It was not subtle at all. Everyone knew where Russ was going. The NFL for me, even though I wasn't there a whole long time, it was a transition. It was a getting used to. And there were a couple of rules that were different in college where I played and the pros where I was, and so one of them was how ties are handled. When I was at Stanford, when you ended the game in a tie in 1980, we tied USC. At that time, they were rated number 2 in the country. We tied them 21 all, and that was it. That was the end of the game. You go home, shake hands, bye-bye. Well, the next 2 years out, I'm in the same LA Coliseum with the 49ers, and we actually wound up regulation time tied with the Raiders. And I was on the field at the time. Regulation ended, tie game. So I start high-fiving with all the Raiders and this and that. You know, I think it's the end of the game. And I'm walking over with a guy that was one of my teammates at Stanford, and kind of walking over to the side, you know, the Raiders side of the ball, and all of a sudden I look up, the game's not over. And I'm on the Raiders side of the field. And I look at my teammates, 49ers, on the other side of the field, and they're warming up and they're getting ready for the overtime kickoff. So I, you know, couldn't just run straight across the field, right in the middle of the field with my 49er uniform. So I was smart though, I figured it out. I pretend like I'm stretching on the sidelines, and I kind of jog down to the end zone. And then I crossed back of the end zone over to our side of those sidelines, thinking I was really sly and got over on it, but I didn't. You know, I had Randy Cross come up to me and said, "You dumb rookie." Even though you know, it's my 3rd year in the league, I'm a slow learner. Anyhow, one of the last things I
Can I ask you
want,
one question?
yeah, sure.
Is Randy Cross, is he really that arrogant? Is he an arrogant football player? He seems very arrogant every time he ever spoke on television. Am I right? Or not?
Randy was misinterpreted. I think that he would say some things that were probably ill-timed, right? So he would make comments about the fans in San Francisco. One of them was,
Atlantic did
he called our fans in San Francisco the white wine sipping fans, right?
Yeah. I remember
And that wasn't a real cool thing. And what he was trying to underscore was the fact that the fans in San Francisco are relatively normal compared with the other fans in the other cities. You know, you have, you know, Cleveland, you have these people dressing up with a dog mask and the dog pound. You know, Green Bay, we had people wearing cheese on their head, right? In sub-zero weather, right? Not just, you know, 72 degrees and wonderful. So you know, Randy was a good guy. We continue to be friends to this day.
Oh, right.
He tried to help me out as best he could, as, you know, Pro Bowl center would do to his center. Pro Bowl guard at that time, he was the right guard. You know, for instance, one time, you know, we had a guy on our team, no linebacker, Jack Reynolds, Hacksaw Reynolds.
Oh, yeah.
You know how Hacksaw got his nickname, right? Hacksaw? You know that? You know how he got his nickname? You know, he played for Tennessee, they were playing Kentucky, and they lost. It was a big tragedy. And he was so pissed off that he took his 64 Buick on Cheapskate Hill that overlooked the stadium, and over the course of 24 hours and 50 hacksaw blades, hacksawed it in half. Left it there, abandoned it up there. So, yeah, Hacksaw was a different kind of character. And he had been someone I've been, you know, he'd been in the league 13 years when I'm there, and I'm on his team. And Cross, Randy, he told me during practice, he goes, "Don't cut Hacksaw. Don't cut, you know, chop block. Don't cut Hacksaw." What do you mean, don't cut Hacksaw? That's what I do. I chop block. That's my signature block. And so we line up for a running play, and I go out to block Hacksaw, and I go to chop him, and all of a sudden it felt like someone hit my helmet with a baseball bat, and I couldn't, and there I couldn't see, and I'm on the ground like, I can't see, I'm blind. And what had happened is he had hit me so hard, my helmet had twisted around, and all I could see was daylight was out of the ear hole that was above my eye. And I came back to the huddle after I dusted myself up, you know, like after, with what little dignity I had left. And Randy said to me, "I told you, don't cut Hacksaw." So anyhow,
That's funny.
yeah, it was not funny at the time. It was not funny at all. You know, I think that's about all the time I have. I really have enjoyed saying, giving you a couple of my stories and telling you about a little few folks that influenced me. I hope that those of you who are interested do get a chance to read this because I think it gives some insights about Bill. I also have left his funeral service program, an electronic copy of it, and Neil can disseminate that if there's interest. It really has an interesting article. Jim Murray, the LA Times reporter, wrote a great article, and that article ran in the LA Times 3 days before we won Super Bowl 19. So anyhow, thank you all for having me. Thank you, George and Gary. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
are there any questions? I'll be happy to field any other questions. Wonderful. That means I covered it.
Hang on, we got another-
John, hang on here, gee, that's great, thank you very much, one of the great speakers that we've had. This is
Scam.
for you.
Right on the way home.
And